All right, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Book of Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley, and this is a special episode of Creators Talk Podcast, a podcast for book conversations with your favorite bookish content creators. This episode is brought to you by Bookem, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookemapp.com. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. My guest today, back for the second time, the wonderful Traci Thomas. Traci is the voice and the creator of the Stacks podcast. She is a writer, a book enthusiast, a conversationalist, a content creator, a podcaster, a Love Island lover, a goldfish and Swedish fish aficionado, and she's your reader's favorite reader. Traci, welcome back to the Creators Talk podcast.
Okay, thank you for having me. I have some corrections to make.
Okay, let's go.
I do not watch Love Island. I watch Love is Blind.
Why did I say love?
Just want to be clear because I don't want to get the Love Island DMs because I don't watch it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is interesting is that you said I was a writer first. And I am so not a writer first. I feel like I'm a writer last, reader first, reluctant writer at the very end. So I just want to throw that out
but
there.
This is why I said writer first, because you've stepped into a lot of writing this last 12 months. And I want to talk.
I know I hate it.
I want to talk a little bit about your writing first in the form of the Unstacked. Since the last time we talked, you've launched it. What inspired the blog, and what's like some things you've learned or learned about yourself even as a writer?
You know, what inspired it? I don't know. I felt like I should do it. I regret that almost every day when I have to sit down and write. I do write. I don't like writing. I don't think of myself as a writer. Still, even though I do write, I feel like it's like people who run who are like, I'm not a runner. And I'm like, oh, you run 2 miles every day. Like, you're definitely a runner. That's the energy that I bring to writing, which is like, I'm not a writer. I don't like it, but I do it because I said that I would. What was the other question?
Well, I'm just saying, like, what have you learned about yourself, even, in spite of, saying you're not a writer, say you are a writer, what have you learned about yourself through writing?
Oh, I don't know. Not a lot. I've learned that for me to write something, I have to just write how I talk. I cannot, which I sort of already knew, but like I cannot and do not try to write good sentences. I'm never thinking like, how can I say this beautifully? I'm thinking, how can I say this clearly? Does this sound like me? Does it sound like I'm trying too hard? And also I have learned, this is also something that I knew about myself, but I have learned the joy of like deleting huge chunks of my work, being like, this is unnecessary. Like I just posted something this morning about nonfiction, and there was this whole like paragraph that I had put in the beginning, and I just kept moving it to like try to find a place for it. And then after I'd like done everything and like read through it a bunch of times, I was like, this paragraph is dumb. And I just deleted it. And I was like, this is great. Why don't more writers just delete the shit that is bad in their books? Because then like, it's like nobody needed that paragraph. I was the only person who cared about it. Nobody's like, why isn't there a paragraph explaining this thing you've already explained 3 times? So I don't know if that's something I've learned about myself, but it's something that I have been able to affirm about myself.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I think as a writer, you just get so connected to everything you write, and you think you're like, okay, this sounds good, and people need this, or otherwise they won't get this part. But it is very liberating to say, all right, this section's out, this part's out, and then even from like reading your blog, I can hear the podcast through your writing too, which when you're talking about voice, I think that has I see it through the blog, which is really cool to see.
Oh, good. That's my goal, is that it sounds like me. Because again, even though I do write, I don't think of myself as a writer. And I live in a world where I read really good writing mostly every single day. And so it's almost paralyzing to try to like write well, knowing that like that's not really my strong suit. And so the way I got over that was just like, don't try to write well. Like, don't try to compete with Kiese Layman. Like, it's never going to happen. Just write how you talk. And that's great. So like, I don't know if you know who Shea Serrano is.
Sounds slightly familiar.
So Shea Serrano used to work at The Ringer, and he
Mm.
wrote those books like Basketball and Other Things, the Rap Yearbook, and he is like the king of writing in his own voice.
See?
I would argue that he's actually like an incredible writer, and he is like, it's amazing what he can do in that way. But he's sort of my like North Star of like, oh, it doesn't sound like Shay, like it doesn't sound like me talking. Like I read everything I write out loud. And if it sounds like clunky or the word is in the wrong place, I'm like, ooh, that's not how you would say that. And I like go back and dumb it down.
See, and then so in classic stacked, unstacked fashion, I want to get into a little show and tell.
Okay.
I want to maybe start in the sports, music, and
Okay.
culture areas. So one of the biggest things we saw, like during this, football run, was AJ Brown kind of stepping into this book influencer space somehow. And I just wanted to hear like what's your thoughts about that? Seeing him reading on the sideline, and just what are some other favorite sports books or biographies of yours?
Okay, so I love that he was reading on the sidelines. I love how mad it made people. Like so funny. But I have to push back. I don't think he's a book influencer. Like, let me see your second book pick, AJ. You've
Yeah.
only pushed one book, okay? Do you know how hard it is to push a different book every day of the week for 7 years, AJ? Okay. So when you finish that one book you're reading about excellence or whatever, call me. We can talk about your next post. But I love it. I loved seeing it at the Super Bowl. I loved when everyone was like bitching about it on the sidelines. I think in the AFC playoffs or whatever, or it was definitely in the playoffs,
Yeah.
or NFC.
NFC, yep.
Excuse me. So I love that. Some of my favorite sports books. Recently, I loved that biography of I always call him Charlie Rose, of Pete Rose, called Charlie Hustle. Um, I I mean, I feel like sports books are so broad because like I consider a book like Into Thin Air, which is about climbing Mount Everest, to be a sports book, but it's sort of recreational, but I do love that book. Um, I love I love a sports memoir. So like I really liked Brittany Griner's book, even though it wasn't really about
Yeah.
basketball. I was so interested in her story. It was a little boring, but I still really liked it. Andre Iguodala's memoir is like one of my all-time fave
Oh,
sports
really? Okay.
memoirs. It's so good. Yeah, and I didn't know who this person was at the time, but it was co-written. It's not a ghostwriter because his name's on the book, but Carvel Wallace was the ghostwriter of that book, who went on to write one of my favorite memoirs of last year, another word for love. So I actually picked up Another Word for Love because I loved Andre Iguodala's memoir so much, and my sister-in-law was like, "This guy's the guy who wrote Andre's book." And I was like, oh shit, immediately adds to TBR, like immediately reaches out and says, come on the podcast before reading a single sentence. I was like, we're doing it. So those are some that I love. And I guess I'm sort of picky about sports books. Like I won't just pick up any athlete's book.
Yeah.
Like people love that Andre Agassi book, Open, and I've heard it's great, but I'm just like, I don't know. I don't care that much about him. So I'm a little more picky when it comes to a sports book.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like even I think some of the ones that I've enjoyed have been like from coaches too. Like they kind of talking through leadership
Mm,
and ideas of that. So there's this one by like San Francisco, Bill Walsh. He wrote a
of
book
course.
back in the day. It's called what is it called? The Readers or The Score Takes Care of Itself. It's like one of my
Mm,
favorite books on leadership in sports. Uh,
oh,
let's
cool.
let's go into movies now. So the Oscars are coming
Okay.
up. So what have been some of your favorite book adaptations or adaptations over the last recent years?
So I did see Nickelboys.
Okay.
I thought it was really great. It's weird. It's not like super straightforward. So if you think you're just like gonna get, it's like Ramel Ramel Ross, I think is his last name, the director. Like make some choices for sure. But it's beautiful. And it's shot, the cinematographer Joe Mofrey is like a genius. And I'm honestly furious he wasn't nominated for an Oscar because it's the best cinematography I saw all year. I also liked Conclave. I read Conclave before I watched it last year. Like I read it and then immediately watched it. So that was really fun. What other adaptations have I liked recently? What else has there been? I don't, oh, I did. Can I tell you what I didn't like?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I didn't particularly care for the adaptation of Erasure into American fiction. I thought it was sort of mid.
That's fair.
I just thought it was like I thought it was like sort of the Disneyfication of Percival Everett. I think that Erasure was like doing a lot more. And I feel like they were like, this is a book about representation. And I don't really think that's like what the book was about. Was it a cute movie? Sure. But like, as far as being an adaptation, I thought it was pretty bad. I know it got a best adapted screenplay, but the people who judge that award don't actually read the source material. So I guess also last year, I thought that the adaptation of Killers of the Flower Moon was pretty bad. The movie was so long, and the book is really good. And I thought it was sort of a weak adaptation. And then I thought the Oppenheimer was really great. I was surprised. I thought I wasn't going to like Oppenheimer, and then I ended up loving it, which was such a shock to me.
Oppenheimer, the movie or the book,
The movie. I
okay.
thought the movie was really good. I didn't read the book. Mr. Stacks did. He liked it, but it's like 600 pages with
Yeah, I said,
really tiny font. And I don't really understand science like that, so I couldn't do like nuclear fission or whatever they're doing. I was like, I just need the pictures. So those are a few adaptations I can think of off the top of my head that I've liked recently.
yeah, those are some good choices. And to your point, even some of the ones you didn't like, I definitely see where you're coming from on that. On the Nickelboys specifically, your book club also read the book. So kind of tell us your thoughts about that. Did you think it did a good job following the book, or just things that you noticed in that?
Yeah, it's pretty loyal to the book. I was so the movie was originally supposed to come out in October, which is why we picked the book for October. And I did it with Franklin Leonard, and Franklin Leonard's like Mr. Fancy Hollywood. He's the best. And when I talked to him, I was like, I'm bummed I won't be able to see the movie before we talk about it. And he got me into a screening before they pushed the date back into December. So that was like a very cool LA moment. I was like, I'm so fancy. I thought that the adaptation was pretty faithful to the book, though some of the stuff in the beginning, like about life before, I don't want to say too much, but it's about a kid who is sort of, he isn't sort of, he's put in a reform school. It's based on a true place. And before he goes into the reform school, some of the stuff about his life isn't in the movie. They sort of cut a lot of his like backstory or like some of the details of that. And I really like those scenes. I understand why they did it. I don't think if you see the movie and you haven't read the book, you lose out at all. But I was sort of like, oh, was curious to see how they would do some of the scenes that they cut. But overall, it's very faithful. They don't really change anything.
Hmm. So,
They add some stuff, but they don't like they don't. But yeah, it's pretty much if you've read the book,
yes.
you'll get exactly what you see.
Yeah, I'm definitely need to watch that this weekend for sure. Looking back, are there any other like pop culture moments that stuck out from 2024 that surprised you or shifted your perspective at all?
I mean, my whole 2024 was definitely shaped by Kendrick Lamar being mean to Drake. I'm a famous Drake hater, so I felt vindicated. My Drake hate also, it predates Kendrick talking about, but predates their beef. I started talking publicly about my hate for Drake in late 2023. So I feel like I'm on record calling him a loser. So I felt really excited. But I think also just like, it felt personally vindicating because I'm always on record hating things and talking shit about things. And I felt like to see Kendrick like take that all the way to the top was just like, see you guys, it's fun. Like we can have fun with art and be mean and still like have a good time. And yes, you might get sued by a loser incel like Drake, but also like everybody else might have fun screaming A minor at the Super Bowl. I'm like, it's a trade-off.
Do you think Drake has any redeemable qualities as far as like how he competed in that rap battle or anything?
No, I think he really lost for sure. I mean, I think what Drake has given the culture is like he gave us a lot of bops for a lot of years. And like, I'm never gonna, be able to tell anybody that I didn't think his first album was great. Like that was like the soundtrack to one of my birthdays in New York, like I definitely had fond feelings for Drake, but then he got weird. And that's sort of when things changed for me personally. I was just like, you're weird. I don't like it. But I mean, he definitely lost that rap battle. Like he just did so many weird, embarrassing things. Like he just really missed, I think he missed the plot. Like all he had to do was give us a bop and he probably could have been fine. And instead he gave us like vocal cosplay of Tupac. It was just like, what are like, you totally misunderstood
Yeah,
the assignment.
goodness. Yeah, use the AI voice and everything. I
Yeah.
mean, goodness gracious. So now that we want to do a little review on 2024 to get
Okay.
into 2025, some predictions. We will get
Okay.
into the book predictions. I also have your predictions from last year, so we can kind of go back and
Okay.
forth.
See how I
Uh,
did.
yeah, so it would be kind of
See how
fun.
full of shit I am. Okay.
Before we get into that, though, you're also a big baseball fan, so I
Okay.
just wanted to, and the Dodgers and everything that's going on. So
I hate the Dodgers.
I know you do, and that's what I was going to ask. So, what's your predictions for the World Series and anything there?
My predictions, anybody but the Dodgers. That's what I'm going for this year, as every year. I'd love to see the Giants do good. That's my team. But as it is been every year of my life, especially since I've lived in LA, it's been I hope that the Dodgers either lose embarrassingly or lose in a heartbreaking fashion. Those are the only two options for me. I thought I was going to get it last year because I thought the Padres were going to embarrass them in that first round. And then the Padres fucking let me down like a bunch of San Diego assholes. Like, I'm just like, you guys were right there. We were right there. Or, yeah, I mean, ugh, God, last year was so
The
frustrating. But
Yankees, yeah, it was tough.
I
Any,
literally had my kids rooting for the Yankees, which, like, I don't hate the Yankees like other people, but I'm like, if you're going to make me have my children root for you, can you not just no show at the World Series? Like, and then that inning with like 100,000 errors, that was the craziest inning I've ever seen. The craziest implosion. Oh my God. Anyways, ugh. Okay, sorry. I'm
no,
like
you're right.
triggered.
Because it was that grand slam that just like last pitch of the game. It was crazy. Yeah.
No, not that one. With
Oh,
the game when they were
yes.
ahead, like the game that they ended up winning the World Series on, they were ahead, and like Aaron Judge had that weird like error, and then
Yep.
there was like another weird blooper, and then it was just like the pitching fell apart. It was just like one of those innings where everything went wrong in the weirdest ways, like overthrowing or underthrowing. Anyways, oh,
Yeah, I
horrible.
grew up a Yankees fan. It hurt. Anyways, so the first category is author most likely to break out in 2025. Do you want to hear your prediction from last year, or do you want to go into who you think first?
Sure. What did I say last
You
year?
said Kaveh Akbar.
Oh, okay. I nailed it.
That's a
Okay.
plus one
Okay.
for
That's
sure.
good. Okay. Okay. You know what? That felt really obvious to me last year. It doesn't feel obvious to me this year. It doesn't feel like there's like an author who is poised to take the world by storm. It doesn't actually feel like there's any books that are kind of getting that same treatment so far this year. I think I think as far as like it's I don't want to say someone who's been around for a while, even though my actual feeling is that Eve Ewing might be the person. She's been around for a long time. This is her fifth book, but I feel like this is the book that's gonna like catapult her into like more literary stardom. Um, but if I was gonna say someone, I don't know. Gosh, it's really hard. I don't have like a debut or anything that is like coming to mind.
Gotcha. I don't know if I really don't know, but there's this book called Audition that's coming out next month that could be interesting. I don't know if I think her name's Katie something. I forget. Kit,
Okay.
but it
Oh,
could be
Katie Kitamura, but
Kitamara. She's been around now.
she's been
Yeah,
around, she's
that's what I
been
figured.
national book. You know who? Okay, here's one that I thought of. There's this book called The Great Black Hope by Rob Franklin that comes out in June, and a lot of people that I like and respect have been talking about it, including Kaveh and a bunch of other people. And that's a debut, so that's a book I have my eye on for June. Like it's definitely a novel that I'm sort of like, what's going on here? So I think maybe that one.
All right, sounds good. All right, for the Chance the Rapper Award, it is the author most likely to have a renaissance in 2025. He did not drop the album like we thought, but still the Chance the Rapper Award.
Who did I say last year?
He said Percival Everett.
Oh,
Let's
A
do
plus for me.
it.
Does this have to be someone who's publishing in 2025?
I mean, I guess you can have free flow, whatever you think there, I guess.
Okay. Renaissance means they sort of went away or were like unknown. So I can't say, okay, I gotta pull up my spreadsheet. I gotta just look at my books. Okay. I was just looking at this book actually. Um, Okay, I'm going deep cut here. If I'm right about this, like you need to throw me a parade or something, because this is like a weird one. If this book is as good as I hope that it's going to be, this person could really like take off, and she's been around for a long time. Like she's a historian, she's amazing. The book is called The Color of Water, or excuse me. No, it's called The Color of Trouble. The Color of Water is by McBride. It's called The Color of Trouble. It's by Martha S. Jones. And Martha Jones is a Black studies professor. And she is extremely like light skinned. She's white passing, though she's like a Black studies professor. And so she's taking this book is a memoir of her sort of whole family going back into like slavery, the time of slavery and like and Reconstruction, and going through the history of her family and their relationship to the color line as it changed and evolved over time. I think that if she can pull off the sort of narrative arc with her background as like being this great historian, I think this book could be huge. And I think it would bring her to more people because she's a little bit more on the academic side. So that's a book that I'm sort of like excited about and looking towards. I also think, who else? Because I feel like part of this award has to be like someone who's been around for a long time. It can't be like someone's second book. It's got to be someone sort of like on the like well known, but maybe like hasn't like totally popped off yet. But I think like Percival Everett was such a good pick last year. Nothing's gonna feel the same as that. So I'll stick with Martha because I think she's great and I think she's so smart. And I think if the book is good, I think it could be a huge book.
We'll look out for it. All right, author you hope to drop a book in 2025. Last year you picked Kiese Layman.
He's doing it this year. He's got a kid's book this year. Oof. I mean, I feel like I know a lot what's coming. Who do I hope? Can I pick like a celebrity?
Yeah, sure.
Like I'd love like Rihanna to drop a book this year or an album. I also I would love who else would I love? I mean, Imani Perry gave us a book this year, so that's a dream. Like so many people gave us books last year. I know it's not coming this year, but I can't wait for when Clint drops his new book, Clint Smith.
Yep.
But I think that probably will be 2026 or 2027 at the earliest would be my guess.
Yeah, I just saw this today, but Don Staley's dropping a book, which I
saw that. I saw that. Really okay, cool. I thought I couldn't say that because I knew it was coming. Also, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is dropping 2 books this year.
That'd be cool too. See?
Yeah. Yeah.
This one is a new one. I call it the James Award, but it's a classic book, most likely to see a revival in 2025.
Well, I mean, Wicked.
Fair.
You know, it's having its moment right now. I think that The Great Gatsby probably is going to have some more because it just hit its like 100 years recently, which means it's like up for retellings or whatever. I think it just hit. That could be a lie, but I guess that one. Oh my God, no, I'm so sorry. I know the classic book this year. It's Frankenstein. Frankenstein is going to be the classic of the year because they're doing a movie or 2 about it. And I've seen it everywhere. I'm going to read it this year. I just bought it at a used bookstore like earlier or in January. And Frankenstein will be I don't know if it's going to get a bunch of like retellings, or it's going to get like a James like retelling, but it's going to be the classic book that sees a revival.
Perfect. Yeah, I think Stephen King and them are doing, I think Hansel and Gretel, I might be mistaken on that. So I'm going to go with that.
Okay.
Book most likely to have an impact on social commentary.
I mean, I think Eve's book. I don't know. I think every book, like, it's just such a dark time. Yeah. What did I say for this last year?
I think so this one was actually a 2024 category, so I'd have to go back and see what it was. I just brought it to this year as a prediction.
Oh. So like, what do people say for that?
Well, last year I probably would have said maybe something by like The Message or something. I think that probably had the most just when it comes to TV run that he coached at and all that. I think it probably had the most. Had a really
okay. But the book that actually does what The Message tried to do is that book that comes out later this month. One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El-Akkad. Okay. It's this book.
Okay.
It's phenomenal. It's so good. He could be a person who has a big renaissance this year, actually. He's written novels. This is his first nonfiction book, but he's also a journalist. This book is such a banger. And like when I finished it, I texted a friend and was like, this is what Coates wishes he had written. Like this is the more fleshed out, better version of the message. And that's not even me like talking shit about Coates. That's just me like keeping it 100. Like I thought the message was fine and good, but this book is like knock your socks off. And I think it could have a real big impact, though he's not as famous as Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I feel like part of what happened with Ta-Nehisi Coates is that people wanted to take a shot at him because of who he is.
Yeah.
Not because of what was in the book.
Very true. Very true. Let's do a quick detour. I just want to talk to you a little bit about your podcast. Like, what's your process like for coming up with weekly topics or your guests and the preparation? Because you do such a great job on your podcast. Like, how do you prepare for your podcast?
My guests, it comes from a lot of different places. So I always put together a list of, towards the end of the previous year of books that are coming that I'm excited about. I keep that list updated, both for reading purposes and podcast purposes. And then I have this other list that's all the weeks of the year. And I sort of slot people in and move them around if I think that I'm going to have them or not. Sometimes I put an ask out, I get told no. Sometimes I put an ask out, I get told yes. Sometimes I get pitched books by publishers. Sometimes I just pick something up off my pile and I read it and I love it so much that I reach out immediately to have the person on, even if it wasn't something that I was thinking about. So it's sort of sometimes another author will reach out to me and be like, you would love this book or you would love this person. So those are all different ways that I sort of come to books for the show. As far as process, I read the book, which I know sounds obvious, but turns out a lot of people don't do that. I read the whole book. I think we've been doing the show since April 2018. I've never missed an episode. And of all of those books, I think I've only not finished 2 books ever. One was a time constraint issue, and one was I just really didn't like the book. And I read a different book by the author because I don't think I finished that one either, though. But I won't say who. But I was locked in, so it happens. So yeah, I read the book. If I can, I listen to interviews with them, with other people. If I can find other texts about it. And as I'm reading myself, I just take a lot of notes and I think about the questions that I have for the author, whether it's like about why they did something or to explain something further. I'm just like pretty naturally nosy and curious. So I just write down the questions that I want answered.
Yeah. How does your reading like kind of work then too? Are you just like you say you have like a bunch of podcasts? Are you reading? Are you doing some audiobooks? Like how you kind of balance like all that to
yeah. I read with my eyes and my ears. This month I'm in like one of my worst reading slumps ever in my entire life. I've read 5 books only, which is not a lot for me. As a person whose job it is to read, and 4 of them have been audiobooks. I just have not been able to get my eyes to read. Like I just cannot do it. So I sort of try to rely on all the different ways to read. I have an e-reader, I read off the page, and I read with audiobooks. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, one of the quotes that comes up a lot on this podcast, people use it a lot, and you've said it, like talking shit about books is good for books, and it's actually helped a lot of creators in this space think more critically about books and being okay with saying they like or don't like a book. So talk to us a little bit about book criticism in this current time frame. Like it's in an interesting space. Like what do you think is still holding people back from having those conversations and engaging with literature in an honest and fair way?
Yeah, I mean, I love that people are saying that here because I got raked over the coals for saying that a lot of times. Authors don't like it. One author called me a common reader. It's like, well, who do you think your audience is, pal? Do you think it's just a bunch of Pulitzer Prize winning critics? Or do you think it's a bunch of common readers? Glad you hate us so much. I mean, I think the state of literary criticism is really interesting because I think there's been some democratization of it by social media and like places like Bookum and even like somewhere like Goodreads where people can kind of post their reviews and they're read by other people and influence what other people think about, going into or coming out of a book. I think obviously like Bookstagram and TikTok do it in different ways. And then I think there's also this piece of it about like traditional criticism from like major news and legacy outlets that like those places are pulling back. They're pulling back funding across the board, which means they're getting rid of jobs or getting rid of people who are like professionally trained to do this work. And I think a lot of us are sort of filling that void, sort of self-taught critics or like people who have opinions. I'm sort of, I think of myself as a critic sometimes and sometimes I don't, but I do think it's important. The spirit of the whole like talking shit about good books is good for books comes from the same spirit of like how we talk about a movie or a TV show. It's not talking shit about books for the sake of being a jerk. It's talking shit about books for the sake of making books feel like the rest of pop culture. Like I just talk shit about Aaron Judge and no one's going to be like, well, Aaron Judge has feelings, right? Like, of course, we know authors have feelings. We know, but people are so precious about how they talk about a book. And like, if I'm going to go to a friend and be like, oh my God, don't read that book. It's the worst, right? Like, that's not real criticism, but that is going to get them excited about the book. They're going to be like, wait, why is it the worst? I heard it was so great. Say more, whatever. Or just like, I always use a reference of like, sometimes I'll watch a TV show and say, okay, I loved the show, but that one actor was so bad. Every time he was on screen, I just wanted to like turn off my TV. And I feel like that energy is what we need to bring to books, right? Like being able to say, okay, I really love the book, but every time they did those fucking flashbacks, it was like, why are we doing this? We don't need this. This was so stupid. And not to feel like by saying that, I'm saying the author is a bad person. And that people always use the thing as like, it's hard to write a book. Well, it's hard to do everything. It's hard to work at McDonald's, but you're rude to the drive-through worker. I just like, we need to not think about authors as like, we need to protect them from their own work and from their own audience. Like we don't do that for anyone else. Even people who's like I'm saying, like their work isn't even about audience. Like people are so rude to waiters all the time to their face, but I can't say I didn't like a part of a book because of an author might see it on the internet. Like, I don't know. I don't buy into that. And I think that sort of thing is really bad. That sort of like babying, I guess, is really bad. I mean, people talk shit about me and about my show all the time. Like I see the comments on my my podcast, but like that doesn't I think that's good for the show. Like, I think it's good for someone to say, I fucking hate her voice. She's so annoying because someone will probably turn it on and be like, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And that's a download.
Well, it's funny you say that because we had Paul Scheer on and he has a show called How Does This Get Made? And it's about movies and all these things.
Yeah.
And there's an audience of people that just want to hear him talk about how bad a movie is, but then you go watch it anyways, right? Because you're like, if it's that bad, I want to go see it.
I have to see it.
If someone's this mad about a book, there has to be something in it that makes sense, And I think what you're talking about is just the truth. I think we can grow a lot in the book space by being okay with saying, hey, this book wasn't for me, but being honest, saying because of this, and this, because someone may actually enjoy and really like those things that you criticize or didn't.
Yeah. I think that part too is really important, that like something that I don't like, you might like because you know that you like character driven, whatever, and I prefer plot. But I also think like even the mean stuff, like even the really casual flip sort of like mean stuff, we should be embracing that too, because that's how pop culture works. Yeah. Nobody goes in and is like, that Van Gogh, I don't like that Van Gogh because this and that and this and that. They're like, ew, that's ugly. What's going on? What that's not an ear or whatever. Like we need to be able to be casual and free and like fun and talk about books in a fun way so that people who are maybe not deep in the book space feel encouraged to be part of it. Like it's so pretentious if you have to like list out every single thing you didn't like. You could just say the book was boring. Like that's okay. Yeah. We do it everywhere else. And I think like with movies, people are like, well, it takes a lot of people to make a movie. Well, guess what, guys? It takes a lot of people to make a book. There's only one name on the cover, but there's a whole lot of people who went into it. So if you're worried about making the author feel bad, just talk shit about their editor. I talk shit about editors all the time. Like there's a lot of people who work on a book and it's not just one person's thing, but also that's not our responsibility. And I'm not saying like to be mean to authors or tag them or to bully them or anything like that. I'm just saying that we should have we should be able to at least talk about books in the same way we talk about other pop culture if we believe that books deserve to be part of the pop culture conversation.
Yeah, and with that being said, one thing that we did implement into our system is like a two-tier system, kind of similar to like how people do movie reviews, where you have the audience score, but then you also have like, verified reviewers. That way you can have a better understanding, and it also protects authors from like negative book reviews. Because I mean, I know there's sometimes people
Yeah.
just smear an author. So,
Yeah.
um,
Review bombing. Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love that you guys do that.
yeah, for sure. And then I guess on the last part, because of all this, there's a lot of pressure to be like a social reader, like how much you read, what genres, what you're reading, all those above. Like as a creator, how do you get past that noise and stay authentic to your own reading style or just your enjoyment of reading?
I don't get past it, to be honest. I don't. I mean, I feel a lot of pressure to read a certain number of books, right? Like, but I also think part of that is because it's my job to do it. Like, if I don't read a certain number of books, I can't make the podcast, right? Like I said, I read every book that we do on the show. So that's like close to 52 books a year, though sometimes I have guests who don't have books, but I have to do at least that. I think like I don't like that people feel pressure to read more if they don't want to. But I also love hearing stories of people who were like, I read 10 books last year and then I found your podcast and this year I read 50. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like I love that for you. Um, I think like, we're adults, most of us, and you should just read as much or as little as you want. I hate to feel like people would feel pressure to read more in a way that would be like detrimental to their life. And if that is how you're feeling, just make a goal to read less. Like, I don't know. Read better, read more deeply, read a book multiple times. You have to break the cycle for yourself, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Let's get back into some of these
Okay.
predictions. The one that I'm going with now is the author you'd like to see or are excited to see break into a new genre in 2025. I'll call this the Jason Reynolds Award since he stepped into
Okay.
the new space.
Well, Kinsey Lehman has a children's book coming out, so I'm
Mhm.
excited about that. I already mentioned the Omar El Akkad book, which is his first foray um, into nonfiction writing. Also, John Green, the YA guy, he has a new book coming out in March called Everything is Tuberculosis. And it's like a book about tuberculosis, which feels like, I mean, he's written nonfiction before, but it definitely feels like a departure from like the Anthropocene Reviewed or like Turtles All the Way Down. So I'm excited about all of those. And Akweke Emezi, they're writing a YA fantasy novel this year, the first installment. So I mean, that sounds really exciting to me. So those are sort of a handful.
Perfect. All right, we'll make sure to write those down. What bookish trend do you hope to see end in 2025?
All of them.
Sounds good.
I don't know. What are bookish trends? I don't know. I'm such a hater. I hate everything everybody does, including everything I do. So I don't know. End it. Cut it
Well,
out.
perfect. Well, the next question for you is what bookish trend would you like to see or start to see continue in 2025?
More shit talk, baby.
There we go. There we go. And last but not least, your most anticipated book of 2025.
Okay. What did I say last year?
I was going to say, you said colored TV or television.
Oh yeah, color television. Okay. Um, God, I love that book. This year I'm gonna go with Authority by Andrea Long Chu, who is a critic at Vulture. And she's won a Pulitzer Prize for her criticism. And it's a collection of essays about who's an authority on things in popular culture. And sounds right up my alley. I'm super excited to get to it. It comes out, I think, April 8th. I got a bunch of other shit I got to read through, but that's a book that I think that's probably my most anticipated book for the year.
Love to hear it. Well, thank you so much, Traci, again for coming back on the podcast, sharing your books, your knowledge, your humor, everything. So just want to say thank you. Let us
Thank
know
you.
again where we can find you or anything that's just coming up in your world that you want us to support.
Okay. You can find me on Instagram at the Stacks Pod. You can go to my website, thestackspodcast.com. New episodes every Wednesday of the Stacks Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And today I launched a new series on my Substack called The Nonfiction Files, where I'll be writing about nonfiction topics in detail and sort of giving nonfiction the treatment that so much fiction gets. So today I started with the taxonomy of nonfiction. I sort of classified the genre and like for genres, categories, broke everything down. So I don't know, it's sort of a fun new project. I'm not exactly sure what it will be, but it's free for everyone. It'll be one Friday a month for the foreseeable future.
Perfect. Sounds good. We'll make sure to check that out. We'll put it all in the show notes. Thank you again, Traci, as always.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kyle.